So welcome. I think the last panel was a perfect segue into this panel, so we can continue the disruption theme. My name's Scott Snyder. I'm actually really excited to be on the stage here. I actually just finished co-authoring a book called Goliath's Revenge. If you're on your way out, we've got a couple of copies in the back. They're going fast. So, and the premise of the book is a little bit of a contrarian view to the last panel, which is established institutions can be disruptors, but it requires some incredible gymnastics, right? And what's cool is I'm surrounded by not just Goliaths, but Davids on the stage. You know, these are the people that are rethinking education. So I think it'll be a great debate. And you know, next to me I have Jeremy from the Make School. I have Daphne from World Quant University, very cool model. I've got Austin, who's driving the Lambda School, also a very cool model, and Adam from Flatiron. And I think all of these are a little bit different. There's some common themes, and I'm going to love to tease out the differences and why some work, why some don't. I'm going to start you with the first rule in the book, which is you have to first decide what's your step change outcome you're going to deliver for customers, right? Otherwise, you're not a disruptor. So I'd love you guys to each say a little bit about what your model is, what makes it unique, and what's your step change outcome. What are you trying to deliver in terms of a 10x outcome for students, for the education system in general? So Jeremy.
Sure. So I'm one of the co-founders of Make School. We are a new college in San Francisco, and we focus on computer science education at the undergraduate level. So we offer a bachelor's program, residential, in-person, face-to-face. Students don't pay tuition unless they get a job, and it's all project-based and industry integrated. I'd say the step change outcome that we're achieving is that we're providing a pathway for students from backgrounds that are currently vastly underrepresented in the tech industry, and we're actually getting them into top tech jobs. So all the top tech employers that you can think of, from the Facebooks to the Googles to the Apples, have hired out of the program. And the student demographics are much, much lower income, much more diverse than you'll find in any CS program with comparable outcomes. And I'd say that's the 10x improvement. I think it might literally be more than a 10x improvement in that regard.
So you're disrupting the front of the funnel and the back.
That's right.
Which is great. Daphne?
Hi. I'm from World Quant University. We are a non-for-profit, and our goal is to advance global education and bring it to qualified, capable students. We have two programs. The first is a master's in financial engineering, and the other is a very intensive applied data science module that goes for about 16 weeks. And we have about 2,000 students in each one of those programs. About nearly half of our students are in sub-Saharan Africa, and we are in over 90 countries. And I guess I would say that we have lived in a world where the talent historically has come to the opportunity. And we're kind of flipping that and trying to bring the opportunity to the talent. Being at a conference like this, we hear all day how everybody wants this talent, is looking for this talent, but they can't sort of make the connection. So our goal is to give opportunity. We are completely tuition free, is to give opportunity to those talented individuals who could thrive in these industries, which we think are very important and are disproportionately underrepresented in many of the countries in which we do our work. So
yeah, in some ways you've created new roles by looking engineering market backwards. What does the market need?
Right, and we're kind of reverse engineering what the industry is looking for. And of course, because we're not legacy, et cetera, we're not burdened by what tenured faculty know how to teach, but rather about what the market is looking for, and then fill those gaps with qualified instructors.
Cool. How about you, Austin? You took a blank slate a little bit as well.
Yeah.
With your step change outcome and your model.
Yeah, so we're Lambda School. We are an entirely online but synchronous school that's completely free until you get a job that pays more than $50K. So we've got students in all 50 states. It's 9 months long, generally computer science curriculum. We also have a design and iOS, Android, data science programs. And our entire purpose in life is to improve people's incomes. So we're trying to make it accessible to everybody. We do things like living stipends, which is not normal for an online school. Everything is on an income share agreement, and the entire purpose is to see if we can help people make more money.
Very cool. And once again, even a slight change on the outcome, focusing on income. How about you, Adam?
Yeah, so I'm Adam, founder of Flatiron School. We're the oldest operating coding bootcamp, I guess, although we have a bunch of other courses as well. I have to wear two hats on this panel because in 2017 we were acquired by WeWork, and so I get to think about how Flatiron School plays a role in education as well as WeWork. As part of Flatiron School, one of the things we've been, I think, uniquely focused on is not just outcomes like everybody else on the stage, but we've worked very hard on the issue of access because we found, and I'm sure if anybody in the room is here from, for example, a community college, you'll find that it's not necessarily enough to take a underprivileged kid and put them in an elite institution. There's a lot of work you got to do to serve low-income students from diverse backgrounds beyond making the cost affordable. So for example, the first campus we launched after we were acquired by WeWork is also under the similar model to Lambda's, which are income share pay after you get a job, but exclusively open to people who make under $35,000 a year. And there's a lot of learnings, and you need to have social workers on staff. You need to have social support, all that kind of stuff. So I'd say that's kind of our unique contribution. On the WeWork side, I think there's an inevitability that more and more education will happen online. Even if a lot of it still happens in person, we're going to need to learn more over the course of our lives. Lifelong learning is for a bunch of obvious reasons, becoming critical. And one of the biggest challenges that exists in online learning is student engagement and everything that's lost when you leave a campus. And so the first thing we did when we joined WeWork was give all of our online students globally free WeWork memberships to use as their campus. We also partnered with 2U to give all of their graduate students around the world free WeWork memberships, and it's had an unbelievable impact on student engagement and outcomes. And so we're thinking about how, as the world moves towards more lifelong learning and online education, how WeWork can essentially provide a utility that is a global convening space for local students who are learning online and want to meet up with each other or with potential employers in WeWork buildings.
Yeah, so there's a whole sphere of other things around the actual education activity that have to be there, right, to support it.
That's right.
So very cool. So you'll see a theme here, but rule 4 in the book is accelerating through innovation networks. So if you're a large company, institution, your ability to turn yourself inside out and plug into innovators like you guys. So tell me a little bit about what you think is needed for larger institutions to better partner with models like yours, or can they even do it? Daphne, is it possible?
Sure, I don't see why not. I mean, I think that there are certainly, and again, we have several hundred students in the United States, but our focus is not so much in the US. And certainly I think there are institutions, a degree like a financial engineering degree, while there are 80+ programs in the United States, is not as common a degree outside the US. So it's an opportunity to partner with universities, certainly, and more traditional institutions to offer, a place to go on to. And then ultimately, of course, it's all about outcomes. So it's great to give people the educational opportunity, but ultimately we need to use the access we have to help people find jobs, and not necessarily just at Facebook and Google and all those places, but in other globals that are not quite as tuned in to this, Andela placement of capable people who don't have a traditional education, but a whole range of corporations that have, understand that their future is predicated on talent, and that they're global companies that do work in all sorts of places, and how do they yield from that local talent?
So you see corporates and universities as potential.
Yeah, I think
Yep.
there's a triangle here that hasn't been a loop that hasn't been closed. That is a huge opportunity, particularly the kinds of programs that all of us offer, which are very, in a sense, very vocationally focused.
How about you, Jeremy? You think the dinosaurs, as they were referred to in the last panel, are they capable of partnering? And if so, what would it take to make a good partnership?
Well, echoing the two sides that you discussed, right? There's the partnering on the corporates and the partnering on higher ed.
Sure.
I think the corporates is fairly quickly discussed. It was a complicated one because there's an incredible amount of cultural inertia behind hiring from elite schools that we had to disrupt to be able to get our students into those hiring funnels. And the way that we did that ultimately, besides a good amount of relationship building and getting folks to understand what we were doing and the curriculum and the pedagogy, was partnerships that allowed corporates to come in, actually inform the curriculum or guest lecture at the school, and also equipping students with portfolios that basically spoke for themselves, so that even if no one had heard of us, that you just couldn't deny that this was someone you could not afford not to interview. And I think, by the proof being in the pudding, that slowly disrupted what was, I think, even now, by and large, despite much PR to the contrary, a still very rigid and very classist recruiting system across industry. On the higher ed side, I think that there's internal challenges and external challenges. Many institutions of higher education operate under systems of shared governance, which can produce results that emerge out of sort of design by committee quality results, and similar velocity, design by committee velocity, which is not very fast. We've found that in talking to institutions of higher education to partner for accreditation, which we did do, we are partnered with the Dominican University of California in San Rafael, and they essentially vouch for us in the eyes of the accreditor, and we partner on certain programs, but that's what allows our program to be a bachelor's program. We found that what was different about them was actually the velocity internally, and that actually we exist in California, at least fortunately, under WASC, a regional accreditor that has been really thoughtful and open-minded about allowing for these kinds of partnerships. And we would have thought the biggest barrier was accreditation regulations, requirements, things like that. We heard all kinds of things about how accreditors are the boogeyman. And the reality was we talked to a number of institutions, and the barriers were within and not external. And so I think the way that one needs to think about these things is to take responsibility for the operational efficiency and the speed of change, and to start creating incentive structures within the institution to reward high speed of iteration, which currently is not at all the culture within institutions of higher education. If you do that, you'll look around and you'll say, oh, there's a make school, probably we should partner with them, or whatever it might be.
Yep. So you're swimming to where the current is. So you guys, is it disrupt, partner, and you've taken a different approach on accreditation as well. So
Yeah, so I mean,
what do you think?
Well, I think so. In his last answer, Austin said something really important, which is that they exist to improve people's incomes. Is that right?
Yep.
A clarity of purpose is really critical, right? Every great organization has that, and when you speak to most universities, it's tough because they're so big. They're these gigantic enterprises, but it's hard to find a clear answer to what is your North Star? What is it you're trying to do? And if you could start there and get a university to admit that this is what we do, this is what we're great at, then it can start to say, okay, well, you know what, we're going to fill our gaps elsewhere. So, for example, this summer, we just partnered with, I guess it's not summer yet, we partnered with Yale to launch a Flatiron School on campus at Yale for credit, right? And the rationale there is not that Yale can't teach and they don't have great students and their students couldn't learn this otherwise. They, I think, have come to terms with the fact that they're an incredible liberal arts institution that caters to a certain type of student in a certain geography, but they just don't, they don't exist to do the types of things we do, so why would they try, right? And so I think it starts with trying to just define your purpose as an educational institution, not to say something as vague as, well, we educate leaders that make better citizens or whatever, right? But to put pen to paper and say, here's what we do really well, here's how we serve students really well. And then if something doesn't fit within that and it's important, maybe we can build the competency, but if not, we should partner, we should buy, we should do whatever. Or we should say, you know what, that's not in our wheelhouse, and we'll admit it, and we won't pretend we're doing it, But I think universities are trying to, and often expected to take on too much.
Yeah, you should have co-authored the book, because we call those crown jewels, right? Know your crown jewels and don't do the other stuff, right? And a lot of universities try and do everything, and they fail to do the basics well.
And I think a lot of expectations, unreasonable expectations are put on universities as well. Right. I mean, I think there's some reasonable expectations that couldn't be met. Well, this is a complicated
Austin, how about
concept,
you got a little bit different model.
Yeah. So on the corporate side, we partner with corporations all over the place. So when we build a curriculum, we actually start with a panel of different hiring partners at different companies and say, basically, tell us what you want, and we will work backwards and create that. And whatever that is, we can do that. So we're building out a cybersecurity course right now, and it's literally a process of going out to 50 companies and saying, what are your gaps? We can fill those gaps. And I think that's what we do really, really well. On the educational side, we'd probably be a little bit on the other side of the spectrum from working with accreditors, et cetera. Lambda School is known for operating at kind of a breakneck speed. We change our curriculum literally every day. We're trying experiments all the time, and anytime we even start to talk to an accrediting body, it's clear that there are a dozen things that we do that are core to being able to move quickly as a school that just don't mesh with the way they think.
So you think it's more like the taxi medallion referred to in the last panel?
I am on the record as saying that accreditation is a taxi medallion in the sense that it's there for a reason, right? The taxi medallions existed so that there would be some sort of licensure of taxi drivers, but it doesn't serve the purpose today as well as a parallel system could. And so we're hoping that a parallel system wins and that accreditation won't be the end-all, be-all unless accreditation processes change drastically.
Yeah. Which I think
that
is
might be the Goliath that changes as accreditors. They're not all created equal, by the way. I mean,
Yes.
100%.
If I told you about a state regulator, you'd think I was reading from Kafka's unpublished works. I mean, it was like ridiculous, but our accreditor turns out to be really reasonable. And I think that over time, that might turn out to be true for more and more of them.
So you're using them to get reaccredited, right? You borrowed from the
Both. So our program is accredited directly as a new program by and under the accreditor, and then we're on a pathway to, as an institution, become fully accredited as ourselves.
Right. So we're in the midst of that,
go ahead,
and I just I mean, you know, from my perspective, in terms of the delivery, I don't look to the accreditor. I think those accreditors exist for a lot of reasons, and a lot of it has to do with in the for-profit educational world, obviously, and there's a whole half a dozen panels that happen already around that perhaps today. But I think that, you know, I'm trying hard not to see the accreditor as the enemy, but actually to see them as a partner in trying where they're motivated, presumably, by the same things we are, which are to provide, to ensure that students get the experience that has been touted to them, and to elevate the quality of what we do. And I think it's important to remember that while we may not value these institutions, and I can certainly say this, that outside the US and else, you know, everywhere, people who are participating, it has a disproportionate perceived value to them that we cannot just simply negate. And maybe we can, you know, do that in certain states in the United States. Maybe we can do that in places where you're sort of, you know, a hip community talking to a hip community, and like we know, it's not about going to Yale. It's about how good you actually code. But I think that that's a pretty narrow and naive view of what the accreditation process is about. And just one other comment in terms of higher ed. The same thing. I think there are a lot of different types of higher ed institutions. All right. You know, Yale sees partnering with you as a way to be perceived partly as being innovative themselves. And it has a value to them that is what their students are expecting. I think there's, you know, higher education is a lot of things, and it's thousands of small institutions. And so we have to sort of be careful of when we say, you know, this monolithic thing called higher education.
It's a big brush, and there are definitely the innovators and trying to disrupt from within. I do want to point out one model, because I'm a big fan of learning from other industries, in the healthcare space, which is a very slow-moving space, regulated. The FDA was actually educated by the disruptors, the WellDocs of the world, the Ginger.io's, on what a mobile medical app was. They didn't even understand how to tell between two different smartphones. And they eventually created a mobile medical app directorate. And now they're one of the fastest agencies at pre-approving mobile medical devices. So it can happen. You can actually educate the regulated bodies, but it took a while, right?
To thank 23andMe for that, too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and not without a lot of broken glass, for sure.
And the accreditation analogy is the previous panelist, Minerva, actually did the education of the WASC accreditor and helped them create the policy that then we went under.
Right.
So that's very much
You're
a similar...
benefiting from some of that.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cool. So rule 5 in the book is value talent over technology, something very close to home for my Hydra colleagues. When you think of the future educator and how the educator needs to change in terms of the role, the profile, what kind of skills they have, how do you think about that? In terms of where the educator's been in the university system and what they need to be in the future to be most effective in models like yours. So anybody want to take that one, jump in?
Well, one of the challenges of getting accreditation is that the expectation is that your instructors are at least one degree above the degree that you're offering, which in our case is, you know, we're challenged by someone who has two. It's a master's program. We have, you know, someone who's been a director at one of the biggest banks in the world for 20 years, has 2 masters, but in
Not a
this
PhD.
narrow view of accreditation. Right, it's
So
not.
our accreditor is not like that.
Right.
But
right.
I'm sorry to hear that yours
Yes,
is
it's, so am I. And that's the fight I'm going to fight. I
Right,
mean, I'm
right.
you know, I'm selecting my battles. But yeah, that is one of the challenges. And as you get sort of, there's a narrower view.
How about you guys? How do you pick your educators and what profiles do you look for?
Yeah, so I mean, similarly, we look for people with experience working in companies building large applications who happen to be good teachers. And it's not a direct correlation building good applications and being a good teacher. There's a small subset that can do both. But yeah, I mean, I dropped out of college. My co-founder dropped out of college. I believe you dropped out of college?
I did. I can't even get a degree from my own college.
So I think that net, there's too much weight from accreditors and especially state regulators placed on the degree relative to the work experience. Like if you could hire Steve Wozniak to be a programmer or a grad of Stanford, who would you hire? So I mean, I get why people do things that way, but I would much rather have somebody who's done awesome work in the field than who has spent a lot of time in academia.
So
Writing papers, doing
I have
research.
we have a little bit of a different perspective. All of our teachers also are both teachers and practitioners. It's very hard to hire people that have that overlap, but I'd rather take a teacher and teach them how to code than take an engineer and teach them how to teach all day. I think teaching is one of the hardest jobs in the world. It's one of the most undervalued skills. I find one of the problems that happen in especially kind of highly scaled programs is just this discounting of the value of a great teacher, right? And all of the research supports this. Any research about education, by any metric of however you define success and however you define inputs, the teacher's what matters. So that's really challenging in a field in which we're all kind of running programs where, by definition, we exist because these skills are so high in demand that we're able to just invent schools and people will enroll in them. It's kind of ridiculous if you think about it. And so the supply of teachers is extremely limited. We've invested very heavily in building out a teacher training team and a curriculum development team and all that stuff. But
Do some of your students become teachers?
Well, we'll hire students as teaching assistants because they've just been through the curriculum, so they can help answer questions. But we'll never hire a student as a lead instructor because they have to hit both of those criteria. But as far as universities go, again, I think this is part of the back to universities doing too much or having too much on their plate. If you're a research institution and you have people there who are primarily driven by research, that's great. We need that in America. This is where innovation comes from, right? But the problem is a lot of those people don't necessarily want to be teachers, aren't there as teachers first, right? And so it's a real challenge, and I don't know that I have a great suggestion for how universities solve that. But ultimately, I think, start by recognizing the reality and saying, all right, well, who here is a great researcher and who here is a great teacher and who even wants to teach and sees that as their purpose versus, okay, I got to go teach this class and it's getting in the way of my next project. But great teachers objectively across any standard of competency, student background, whatever, are the single biggest determinant of successful outcomes in education, and you have to start with that.
So Jeremy, does that, given you have a physical model, does that constrain your pool of educators or?
Well, we can't have people beaming in from the other end of the country. That's true. But I think everything that's been said is absolutely correct. You want the practitioners who can teach, the existing models are not always factoring that in. To your question about technology, we've experienced a variety of attempts, both that we've produced ourselves and as a student who was recently, relatively speaking, in high school and college, to try to bring technology to the classroom. And I think what we're finding is that a lot of it is unfortunately frivolous. The good teachers matter. You want to essentially build technology that allows a good teacher to expand their reach in doing the core things that make them a good teacher, which in the 21st century is no longer having information, which was a big deal, right? 100 years ago, it's like, the university library was like the one place in your life that you could actually get humanities information. Then you went back to your hometown, then that was cut off, and now there's Wikipedia. So you have the faculty, their killer thing is not that they have information, it's that they're able to coach, to mentor, to interact real time with students, to help them, in our case, debug, but also because we're an undergraduate institution, there's a lot more to it than just the tech and the code. It's about getting students a well-rounded education, preparing them to actually go out into their first jobs. And so the technology has to be about essentially trying to automate the things that are the least human about what a teacher does, and expanding the reach of a teacher, and not requiring the teacher to be a holder of all the information or the deliverer of the information, but to use the most human qualities that they have and amplify their qualities as a good teacher. And when you look at a lot of technology in the classroom, that's not what it's about. And it didn't come from those principles, and so it tends to be left by the wayside. And I remember even at my high school, there being probably hundreds of thousands of dollars of unused ed tech products, physical and digital, that had been attempted to roll out in the classroom. And at the end of the day, like, a really great teacher with a blackboard and a piece of chalk, can outdo actually a mediocre teacher with fancy schmancy ed tech that doesn't really amplify the things that make them a good teacher.
I also think being a good teacher, online is quite different than the traditional model that we have, and I don't think that we shouldn't, understate that. It's we have found that there are
So it doesn't always
instructors-
translate.
Right, we've found that there are instructors who really have, again, a lot of domain expertise from industry. They're very enthusiastic. Some of them are teaching at, very prestigious institutions. But there's a training process to teach them how to teach online, because, this is delivered, a lot of it's in the can. And they're really there, to your point, for that kind of elevated, customized discussion in forums, and to lead discussions, and to we've addressed the 90% of the content that is across the board and the same, and that you can study at your own pace and all of that. So now the value add is where you bring your unique perspective, expertise, and are able to reach students and to sort of extract. That part of it is not online versus offline. That's
Sure.
a certain human quality. But the ability to present it in that context is a different kind of challenge than it is in the traditional model of, a lecturer in the front of a room.
Cool.
So I actually think that instructional design for an online instruction environment is fundamentally different than instructional design for a physical classroom. And for a long time, a lot of the failures in online schools were either trying to take what worked in a physical classroom and just plop it online, or worse, which was let's do all of the bad things about that and also none of the good things.
Right.
So I actually fundamentally believe that online can be a superior environment because of the way it scales, because of the way you can instantly. We'll have a classroom, and with one button, everybody's in a breakout room of 2-on-2, and the instructor can pop into each one or pop out, and then we can bring the class together in ways that are really difficult in a physical classroom. So I think people need to think about instructional design from the ground up online, instead of trying to take what's worked for hundreds of years in a physical classroom and just copy paste. I don't think it works.
Sounds familiar
Totally right.
with any technology adoption in big companies or any organization, right?
Accurate.
So I want to switch the discussion to income and fee models, right? Because you guys all have a little different flavor. A couple income sharing agreements. We have a nonprofit model. We have a fee-based model. So tell me a little bit about why you chose your model and why you think it has advantages. So maybe we'll start with you.
So we started with Income Share in 2014 when we launched the program that was a non-degree program that has become now the accredited bachelor's program. And at the time, we were focused on all the pedagogical, I think, aspects that we're discussing, all the staffing aspects, we want to have the right faculty, the right content, the right integrations with industry. But the fee question was a really important question. And ultimately, it came down to how can we make this the best deal possible for students, and what is ethical if you're going to be stating that your North Star, your purpose, is going to be along the lines of building pathways to top careers or improving incomes. And if you're going to be doing that as a new institution, especially as a for-profit institution, you're going to want to make sure that there is no incentive for you to be enrolling students and then not having them be successful. And you want students to know that you're going to put your money where your mouth is. And when we started that, it was in the summer of 2014. To give you a sense, like, I could not find a lawyer to write an income share agreement. It was in part due to the fact that the guy who knew best had just quit his firm to start a company specialized in income share agreements. We actually became their first client the following year. They're called Vimo, and they work with Purdue and a bunch of others. But also, it was something that hadn't been done in the context that we're doing it in at all in recent memory. And so actually that summer, I wrote the Make School ISAs, which gave our lawyers a heart attack because we needed to roll it out, we needed to enroll our students, and we were not going to let procedural issues get in the way between us and the model that we thought was the correct model. And so I can say that that's the model that 90+% of our students use, and it has really positive effects, knock-on effects in the culture of the institution, which cannot be understated. I think that people look at it a lot from a student protection perspective, like, oh, there's downside protection for students. That is true, that is wonderful. But also to be at a school where an incremental student who is not going to be successful has no value and there's no reason to think about even recruiting them, no matter what school you are, being student-focused and only having the only valid conversation is how do we serve students better and how do we make them successful. To have that be true and baked into the financial model is incredibly powerful. And I think that new institutions that are born or established ones that adopt this to a significant enough degree of their income stream that it actually matters and that it hurts. We see some schools using it to supplement scholarships and the like, that they're not going to feel deep pain if students don't get jobs. But for any school that is actually going to put their livelihood at risk if the student's livelihood is at risk, I think is going to be an institution that on a long time scale is going to outlast the institutions that in the last talk were alluded to as being dinosaurs staring up at a meteor.
Gotcha. And I'm going to ask Austin, because he's also an ISA-based institution. Mm-hmm. How did you pick that model? Same reasons or anything to add to that? Or?
Yeah, I mean, so I come from rural Utah, and our goal was how can we help the guy who's in rural Utah who can't afford to move to San Francisco, he can't afford to move to New York, he can barely afford a laptop, like how can we make him a software engineer or her or, and the vast majority of our students are using an income share agreement, and ours, I think that if you're a vocational school and really what you're selling is, hey, we'll help improve your income, if you're not willing to put your money where your mouth is with an ISA, you'll probably be dead within 5 years.
You just don't have aligned goals.
Yeah, I mean, I get why people have upfront tuition, but I think as we get more results, as the cost of capital comes down, as the terms of ISAs get better, I think it should, in the long run, be a vocational school as ISA or something similar or
something
nothing.
similar, yeah.
So,
Yeah, Adam.
I'll take that. So we do everything from ISAs to scholarships to student loans with the money back guarantees. So you can every model under the sun that I know of, we have some partnership or some mechanism to offer that. So I'm in the boat. That said, I do think these are new financial instruments, and there are a lot of unknowns, and I think we do have to tread carefully. And as much as I recognize all the problems with accreditors, there's a reason to move slowly in this industry, because one little loophole creates a giant disaster for a lot of people. And my concern, and again, we offer ISAs in most of our campuses. My concern, kind of looking out into the future, is that if the model perpetuates, I mean, from an economics perspective, it's not all too dissimilar from an insurance model, right? You're kind of paying a premium. You're buying insurance essentially on your education. And if you kind of play out the economics, the model becomes most compelling under one of two scenarios. Your school either has very, very, very strict admissions criteria so that you can predict out who's going to pay you back, because some number of students, ideally as a tiny one, won't be successful and won't get a job, but you've serviced them. So either you then, the industry gears towards very, very strict admissions criteria, and the people that need it the most don't get access to it, which I'm sure we all want to avoid. Or you operate your model at such scale that you can train hundreds of thousands of people, but if just a few thousand of them get jobs and the rest of them don't, your cost of delivery is so low that you're still able to stay in business. But what that means is the quality of education suffers. Right? So
why can't you have a larger funnel and just educate them well and not be selective but still provide a good education?
Because people are different, and different people need different investments in education to be successful. And if we're talking about the education industry as a whole, there's a universe of a difference between educating somebody with a liberal arts degree versus somebody who got a GED and worked in retail for a year and couldn't even make it in community college. And a model that is one size fits all won't necessarily work It just won't necessarily work. And again, we do this, right? I believe in it. I think we do have to recognize.
So in some ways,
that,
it's behavioral and situational.
well, just on a macro level, right? Any individual institution can do really well, right? So we can carve out a niche and say we're going to be a premium school and have super high admissions bars, and we're going to make sure that we're going to even be a nonprofit. And so we're not trying to make a profit, but we're just going to admit enough students. We're going to try to get every one of them a job, and the ones that are successful pay us back, and the ones that don't, there's no cost to them, and that's great. Or we're going to operate a really big scaled course, and whatever. Either way, any institution can do well, but on a macro basis, it can create it can actually reduce access, and it's just something to pay attention to.
So
it's not necessarily going to happen, but I think if we just assume something this new is universally good at a macro level.
Yeah, we're in the early innings.
Let's just say when we've done that before in education, things haven't gone well.
You said you wanted us to argue,
Yes,
right?
this is good. I like this.
So Lambda School will accept any student that we think will be able to get a job afterwards, and we have a pretty good sense of what our delta is from where we can get you to and where you are and where we can get you to. And if we can't get you there, whether or not we charge upfront or on an ISA doesn't change. In fact, it's actually worse if we don't have an income share agreement, because then we're a little bit incentivized to accept you anyway. So I actually fundamentally disagree respectfully.
No, but the key caveat is you said any school we think we can get you a job for, right? And the reality is, like, what's inspiring about education?
If there's a student you don't think you can get a job for, it's okay for them to pay you upfront tuition?
No, of course not. But an ISA model that's...
So if there's a student you don't think will be successful, you should be denying them regardless, correct?
Right.
No, hold on a second. An ISA model that is open to everybody is fantastic. However, in as much as schools are discriminating and saying, doing the right thing, any individual school does the right thing and says, look, I'm not going to admit somebody, it's bad for them, even though they don't end up paying, I don't want to waste their time.
So do we have the data yet?
But then the system breaks down, and we have to build models that don't just service the people we think can be software engineers in Silicon Valley in 6 months. But we have to make this more accessible.
But that's not the only model under which it would work. And you can run the numbers on a variety of different models. We saw in the previous panel a school that's going to be educating teachers, and in fact, I believe that this model could work for educating teachers as well. Sure. I think an unspoken philosophy behind what you said is the notion that selection at entry is the predictor for outcomes, which is one thing that I think is behind a lot of what's broken in higher ed right now. It's prestige from where you come from and not prestige about where you're going. Elite means who you reject and not who you let in.
I think that's a really easy thing to say, but if you have a program design and you invest in program design, that means you invest in program design for a specific person that has specific needs, that you're conscious of the fact that
I want to get Daphne in here because she's got a different model. So Daphne.
No, I'm afraid.
I'll end my thought to say your economic incentive is to actually admit as many students as you can under ISA. And that's why we don't craft our model for the students who would have otherwise been able to get to Harvard. We actually have a majority low-income student population. 45% of our students are underrepresented students of color. We built a program for them. There's way more of them than the students who could go to Harvard. And the numbers since 2014 show
so the data is encouraging. In the early stage.
Right.
Daphne, tell us about nonprofit.
No, that's all right.
Why'd you pick a nonprofit
We could go on for hours. So ours is a nonprofit model because we are funded by someone who himself was the beneficiary of a great education.
Problem solved.
Everything. Well, you're getting versions of that. Arguably, you could argue VC firms with very patient capital are just a different version of that as well, arguably. So we're just getting where we have different.
Kind of you to say.
But and it's sort of true, right?
Sort of.
I mean, yes, and the goal over time is certainly to generate revenue, all right? Whether that is, and for us, it's, as I said earlier, is on the other end, and helping people find jobs. And then finding, again, I go to these international conferences. People are looking for this talent. They're desperate for this talent. Not just in San Francisco, but all over the world. And not just men, but women as well, who have these capabilities and do not have access. And ISAs don't work in Ghana and they don't work in Malaysia. And so, I mean, they might for certain cohorts, but not for us, all right? And so again, we're taking a very open and let's see how it unfolds approach to it that will,
So we are out of time. That was very, I love the way we ended there. Lots of debate. And by the way, if my advice to the institutions in the room, the Goliaths, is learn from the disruptors and partner with the disruptors. And that's the way you're going to incubate that second speed in your business. So I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you guys. Great job.